What I want to do first is kind of walk through my PowerPoint presentation and give you some background information on it, and then kind of go from there. But let me pause and say again, my name is Linda McGraw. You probably got that from the Meetup app. I am a software engineer. I have been in IT for a little over 14 years, doing a variety of different things. The app that I'm going to show you today, it is PHP based. We won't go very heavy into PHP since you will have a workshop. The next workshop is PHP, and they're going to show you some scripting. But ideally, what I want you to be able to get out of this whole activity is more of a process that you would do to build something. So what I'm using today for this example is one of my girlfriends got married this year, and in order to surprise her, I wanted to build her a custom website to manage her wedding invitations, right? We know weddings can be very expensive. There's everybody that's trying to sell your stuff and things like that. In doing that, I created like a one-page template and just kind of spin off from there. So I'm gonna walk you through the process, kind of the thought process of how you come up with this idea and then you make something out of it, whether it's, like I said, something to manage invitations, or like I've done a project to do like a drum machine, just whatever your idea may be. So let's see here. We just talked about this a little bit. We're gonna start off creating this web app from a one-page template. We're gonna use PHP, MySQL, CSS, and JavaScript in this process. So you're looking at from end to end. Can everybody still hear me? Okay, all right, so. Prerequisites for this is gonna be, in order to follow along, you really need to have an idea a little bit about HTML, CSS, be a little bit familiar with working with a variety of different JavaScript libraries, know a little bit about entity relationship diagrams. I'm gonna walk you through that process, but I'm not gonna go in on the key concepts of that when you're talking about a data model. If you want to dig a little deeper in that, I would suggest that for the entity relationship diagrams, you can check the YouTube channel. We do have a couple series out there where they just dug straight in on that topic, talking about how you take a unnormalized data set and then normalize it to support your initiatives. We're gonna look a little bit at classes and objects. You hear a lot of this stuff when you're when you go to college, and sometimes in even some of the boot camps. But as you get out into a lay world, the layman world, sometimes these terms go away. So I'm not gonna focus on trying to talk about a lot of the formal words per se that you would hear as you go through this thought process of you've got this idea, somebody's come to you and you wanna get from A to Z. I'm gonna talk more in a layman's term, as if you were just talking to your friend or talking to this person you just hired at work and you're asking them to help you with a project, okay? But classes and objects, in this regard, we're gonna be talking about data. We will be talking about different properties and methods, what actions you want to perform on that data for this project. We're gonna look a little bit at the MVC design pattern. Although I took the final project that I did for my friend, it is ideally a one-page template. You got some things plugged in there to do some of the bootstrap and all that good stuff. But I converted it over to MVC design. I keep getting these tongue twisters, so y'all excuse me. Pronunciation is not my best thing. So, but for today's demo that I'm gonna upload to GitHub after the class so that you guys can look at the code, I converted that template to a MVC design pattern just so you can kind of look at different things, look at what does a model look like, what do these classes look like, what type of actions happen. So because we won't be able to take a real deep dive into that, but you can look at the code later because I'll explain to you where everything's at. And then we're gonna also look at Git version control. We're assuming that you already know how to go out to GitHub, download the repo, and you'll be able to put it on your desktop or your local host environment, or if you're in AWS or whatever, and look at the code. So we won't cover that today. All right, so tools that I would recommend, just in case we got somebody in here that's new, you heard about it and you just kind of want to see how to get going. You've never done this before. In order to follow along with the demo, again, I'll put the slide deck out there so that you will be able to see the information we discuss. It's going to be best that you have like some sort of integrated development environment. Also, some type of server. I like to use a local host server per se. I like to build on my PC, then push it up to Bitbucket, and then run some pipelines to send all my goodies over to the hosting company. But you can do it however you want to. I put some examples of some IDEs that I've worked with my PHP development. I will say that with Atom, you can go out there and plug in some different tools to help with aid in your PHP and scripting, and also being able to test from Atom command line. They have a lot of those available. MySQL, if you're familiar with XAMPP, XAMPP is a tool that you can download. It will just totally install your entire local host environment on your machine if you prefer to go that route. It will also install the MySQL, MyPHP admin, but you're welcome to use other tools to do that. You'll see some of my scribbling in here where I've been working on this PowerPoint up until today, so excuse it. Let's see here. This is our outline. These are the things we're going to cover. You probably saw this in the meetup. I did refine this just a little bit. However, I did not update the meetup app. It's all the same thing. I just kind of changed up some of the words after I had a chance to sleep a little bit. All right, so let's take a look at the first thing here. When you come up with an idea, somebody asks you to do something, sometimes you're so high level you need to figure out what you need to do and why you're doing it, right? So for this specific project, I thought it might be a good idea just to put some objectives in the form of an epic, which is basically just a series of different user stories. So first one we're going to look at. As a couple, we want to share key details about our upcoming wedding event, so family and friends may be able to RSVP, okay? Then also as a couple, I want to be able to get the total number of RSVPs for each activity without having to manually compile a list. So these things answer the question, why am I doing this? I also want to be able to export it to an Excel file easily. As an attendee going to the website, I want to get a confirmation to know that they got my reservation, my RSVP. As a non-attender, I want information about where I can send a gift so the couple will know I'm wishing them well, although I can't attend. So these are just some objectives. So as we're going into the data set here in a little bit, we'll be thinking about these objectives when it comes to what type of data do we need to make sure we include in our entity relationship design, which is essentially our database that's going to support our web application. So that's why this is important. A lot of times this won't capture everything you need, but it'll get you off to a great start. For this specific project, before we get into looking at the app, I want to explain some of the limitations. We're just going to create one website We're gonna have one couple's web page. We're gonna have one dashboard, added a couple extra things in there. We'll have one database that will store the data. We will do minimum styling on the template, as this project is more about making the application dynamic as it relates to data in, data out, changing up things on the UI. As for CSS, we've also had some classes on SAS. You can hit up the YouTube channel and look for those in more details, where that once you download the code, you can go in there and massage the CSS however you would like to, okay? All right, so I've got this great idea. The first thing that I want to do is, what if I've never built anything like this before? So when we're talking about the process of going from A to Z, a lot of times I've worked with people in my career where they hit a roadblock and they just don't know where to go. Googling, searching has been my best friend as it relates to just getting an idea. Sometimes I don't even know what I want it to look like. So when you think about your user stories that we just discussed, you start thinking about keywords you can go out there and search for. Since we're designing a web page, we know a lot of the different programming languages. You have different frameworks, you have different libraries. Some of them also provide you with templates. As a very, very new person coming into this field, or a hobbyist where you may have taken a code camp or something on freecodecamp.com, you learn about a lot of free resources. I'm gonna say like W3 Schools is a very, very good one, where you go out there to Google, you put in search words like wedding template, wedding invitation, reception, bride, and you get all of this stuff, right? As you code more, you'll get a little bit more familiar with those websites that are really a good source. I'm gonna try to add stuff like that to the end of this deck so you'll have it. But I use W3 Schools a lot. Sometimes I look at sites that sell templates, but because I'm a programmer, I'm really not big on paying somebody for their template. But I will look at the template in order to get a few ideas on what I want to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So like color schemes, where I put this block and that block, right? Oh, I didn't think about a bouncy thing, right? So that's one thing with looking at templates help you. Let's take a quick look at the template that will be used for this. Okay. So you will notice here that this is just a simple wedding template. I put the URL where I got it from here for you guys, simply because it's been out there for a long time. But I did notice that they're kind of shifting things around. So when I went to go pull the pictures this week, some of the links were broken, but I did download everything where that you guys would have it. So this is the first template. It's going to be a template where it's already got mobile responsiveness built in, as you can see when you look here at this one over here and that one over to the little small phone. You can see that. Just 1 second here. We're also gonna look at a dashboard, okay? So I was doing this website for my friend and I knew she needed the invitations, but every time she wanted to know how many counts she had, I really didn't want to go running some type of database query. So I was like, okay, I want to build a dashboard. I just found a plain Jane Bootstrap template. And as you'll notice, this one is actually called Analytics. It's not really a dashboard. In my searching for dashboard templates, I pulled up all kinds of stuff with all kinds of bells and whistles, but I didn't need all that. So I decided to go the simplest route. All right, so once you've selected a template, what you want to do is look at your template and identify the reusable components within the template. And what I mean by that, it's like data elements or whales or blocks. May look like a card here, a card there. You notice on the previous one where we saw the little squares look kind of like a rectangular. Those are reusable things. So as your mind is spinning and you're trying to think about how I'm going to put this thing together, how can I do this? Because one thing with code, a lot of times people want to go with the objects, or what you hear is the object-oriented approach, because you want to reduce as much redundancy as possible. And on a web page, you don't want to have 50 boxes if you don't have to, you know. So some of you will be able to take this template and probably enhance it a lot better in that regard to reducing that. But I'm showing you this from a new starter's perspective, not necessarily where you've got to have Laravel or Yiki or one of those frameworks. So you'll see what I mean here in a second. And you also want to make sure you know the static things, the things that need to remain the same on every single page within your site. Look at those things that will vary as well. Okay, so on the template we saw that there was a name and a date. That name and the date right now is hard-coded on that template when I downloaded it. But remember in the beginning where we were talking about project limitations, when I first built this site, I wanted to build this site just for one person, right? Then I got to thinking about, what if I made it more flexible, let's just use that word, where that if I needed to use it again, all I've got to do is update the data or add another data row to the table, and it just plugs in each person's name. Do you guys see where I'm going with this? So even though we're talking about a wedding website, think about this if you were building a store with products in it. I use the same approach when I build a reunion information management system with a section where you could purchase products. A product was something that varies depending on what a person clicks on when you go to the product detail page. So this is what you're looking at. When you look at your templates, you just want to make sure what can change. Although I selected those two things, you might, that little tagline in the middle, we could have identified that also as a data, a varying item. It's totally up to you. When we get ready to create our data model, we could have created a attribute for tagline, giving each couple the ability to create their own line. Jane and Joe Dunn might say we are getting married. Wilma and Fred Flintstone might say we're getting hitched. Do you understand where I'm going with this? Okay. All right, so as we go through the site, you'll see again, we identify Jane and John as being used again on this page. This is a one-page template, but it's broken down in sections. So you kind of think you got multiple pages, but this one is actually one. So you'll notice that Jane and John's name is there. It's actually there 2 times. Do you guys see that? So instead of having it hard-coded 3 times on this one page, if we create that data attribute in our model, then when we get to our web page in our PHP code, we link that data attribute to a PHP variable or a JavaScript variable, whichever one we're going to have update this template. Then we only got one spot to make that change. Does it make sense? All right, so we also have another one called story. We can let them talk about what they want to say. Again, if we go back, let me know if I lose anybody, because I'm going to talk about the product page. Imagine you're on a shopping cart at the store, you click on one product. You see a product picture, product name, product description. So in order to simplify your coding and reduce your nightmares, if you have these individual attributes linking from your data set over to your UI, user interface, your web page, then you just make the update in one place. Everybody with me? All right, so. Again, we see down here on that nice little static menu bar that the name stays stuck there. We also get two more components added, where if we go back to our idea, I might be able to use this site again. Wilma and Fred probably wants to get married somewhere else, so we identify the reception location and the wedding address differently. Okay? You guys kind of getting why I'm saying that? Okay. All right, so on the bottom part of the template, as you scroll up, we're still looking at a one-page template. They also have a nice little slot for when you need to respond by. Okay? That's a date that would variate if we decide to replicate this site using like the MVC model. I'm going to show you the model here in a little bit that I did for my friend. Then I'm going to show you the MVC model, okay? We also see that we've got a reusable component. I'm saying the word component because it's just like a button. You know, when you get into some library, in the worlds of some libraries like React and things like that, you could create a button component and have all the stuff back behind it that happens. But I just wanted to point out, you've got something that's happening twice here. Same thing, okay? All right, so when you click that RSV button, we get a pop-up form. In the HTML world, Bootstrap world, we call it a model. So, but we know that we got a guest name by default. We also got a status. And guess what's there again? We have our couple's first and last name again. So imagine we've seen that name almost 5-6 times now. All right, on the dashboard, it was a little bit different. My thinking on the dashboard was that I really can't use any of this text on here except for the word dashboard. I don't need to really identify that. But I do like the way that the Bootstrap template already had sections built into it for me to jumpstart my Bootstrap page. And what I mean by that is rows and columns, you know, where I could just take out what they've got and then let my JavaScript update that using Ajax or what have you. All right, so again, I put this slide in here by ERDs just so it'll be here. I'm not gonna go into it in detail. Again, this is just very high level to put into context what we're gonna talk about in the data model. It will be there if you need to read it once you get your hands on the slides. Now, let's talk a little bit about, we've seen the layout of the website, but we need to talk about what data do we want to put in there when we talk about making the front end talk to the back end. What data do we need to capture? So now we're talking about all the lists of the entities. Now, in a perfect world, different designers are going to come up with different names for their entities. They're going to come up with different attributes they feel like they need to capture. In order to keep it simple, I came up with 3. This project is going to be a little bit limited in scope. We're not going to worry about having a page to make people log in or secure it and all that good stuff. We're just going to look at this component of where we've got a couple. We're going to call it couples because, like I said, we started with a one-page template, created this website for one friend, and I thought about, well, hey, how about we put it over here where it can be used for many friends if we wanted to, right? So instead of just saying couple, we're going to call it couples, make it make sense in my head, right? For couples, we're defining what ideally high level is a couple. As I begin to think about those individual data attributes, or if you call it data elements, whichever works for you, the data that I want to capture in this is details about the bride and the groom, pretty much. For events, ideally very high level, we know that when a person is getting married, you've got several different events. I put 4 here, but for this project, we're going to focus on just the first 2, weddings and receptions. Okay? I listed the 4 there. Another reason, if you decide you want to expand the model a little bit, there's flexibility in there where it calls the different events, and you can kind of mess around with that. Update the code to suit your liking. RSVPs. I decided to call this entity RSVP as instead of guest or participant, because really, when I go back to my user story, I really just needed to know how many people was going to RSVP. In our template, when we looked at that pop-up model, you notice we had 2 buttons. A person could click if they're going to go, or they could click if they're planning on not going. What I discovered after using this in a real world scenario, many people don't go to the page to click just to say that they're not going. But we'll see how that information is used on our dashboard, okay? All right, so just to break it down, I put this in here so you would be able to see as we get ready to play with the data that supports our website. Is everybody still with me? We're gonna look at couples as a bride and groom. The couples, they plan a wedding. They plan an event. Ideally with the event probably want a name and a type. We're looking at like a wedding or reception, and an individual event can have several different RSVPs. I keep getting all these tongue twisters, so forgive me, okay? So you can look at this and noodle this a little bit on your own. I put a note there just to remind you, if you look at it later, our RSVP is considered to be an invited guest response. It's basically looking at going versus not going. And another limitation we're going to look at, we're designing the model so that an individual RSVP that's associated with a specific event, it can be, once a person goes to the site and they register, if they go back again using that same email, they're just going to update their existing RSVP. Does that make sense? So we just keep it simple, not try to say, okay, we got a response for Bill Doe on the 1st, says he's going. We got a response from Bill Doe on the 10th, says he's not going. Or let's see, he changed his count. We're just going to overwrite everything and keep a record of the date when it was created and the date when it was last. Like payments or billing, it may be essential that you don't use this approach. I'm just going to put that out there, because sometimes for some data sets, you need to see every single transaction, okay? But for this one, we're just going to keep it simple. Another thing I look at, a lot of times if you're doing hosting, where they're giving you like 2 gigabyte databases and things like that, I always try to reduce how much data I may have, just in case I decide to expand my model. Think about this. I said that we weren't going to have a login, but what if I decided to add a login later and let the login be for the event planner? And when the event planner comes in, I set her up on top of events. She can manage, log in and see all of her events, see all of her couples, see all of her RSVPs from the dashboard, right? You see how that works? When you take the time to plan it out and you do it in a structured manner, you make it easy for you to expand and grow with it. Okay? All right, so again, we talk about the fact that it's going to be normalized. We looked at how it's going to relate. For this project, we also take the time to create the tables, define the primary and foreign keys and indexes for each data element. And the script that I use to create the database, it's in there, but I'm gonna leave it up to you to go name your database, run the script and all that good stuff. You'll probably notice that you'll have to change the settings file, take the name off of it from append it on the end example in order to update it with your database name and credentials, okay? All right, so these are the items that I decided to get on the couple. Based on that first template that we looked at, I decided that I need to know the first name of each, the bride and the groom. I also decided that I wanted their email addresses just for planning purposes if I decide to expand my model. I don't really need them right now because it's not posted on the website. But since we're building things, let's go ahead and put it in there for now. Also, want to know who the primary contact is. For this specific situation, you could put the primary contact, it's limited to either bride or groom for the data set. Also, we look at the couple's address. On the one pager that I show you, I'll show you how the address was used in order to let individuals know where to send stuff, but on one of the models it's not there. So it'll be totally up to you whether or not you want to use that. Again, on the events, we spec out the data that we need in order to create the event. So you see like the addresses, the one unique thing that I would say here is you see that we have the event ID, we have a couple ID, and we have a master event ID. When we were just talking about one couple, the one page that I did, we really didn't have to have a couple ID. We really didn't have to have a master event ID. When I decided to expand it over to the MVC model where I could reuse it again, I added in those 2 elements to support as we flip from different couples on their couples page as well as their dashboard page. The master event ID relates to when an event is created, if the couple is going to have a wedding, that's one row in the data set. You with me? If the couple is going to have a reception, then you've got a row in the database for couple number 1, that's for a wedding. Then you have a second row that's for the reception. On the row that's for the reception, it would get the primary key of the wedding and the master event ID. So we can link them. So as we fill out the web page, we want to be able to pull in the data for each row. I built it this way so that, again, if I decide I want to expand it, say for example, I add some other pop-ups and boxes to it, or I can put information about the bridal dinner and the bridal shower and want to expand those events types, Then it allows me to go in and get the couple ID and get all the events, get all the data that's related to it. For this exercise, when you look at the code, you will see that I just focused in doing the code to just support the two. But again, once you get the code, you can use it as a homework assignment. Just kind of play around with it and see what you can make happen. All right, so RSVP. We talked about how the RSVP is going to link to the event. You see where in the initial pop-up box, they only had names. In exporting the list, I didn't want to have to deal with breaking out the names and stuff in the MVC model. So for expanding the project, I decided to do a field for first name and last name. One thing I discovered on the first one-page template, when you just put name, you had people put in their prophetess Jane Doe, Mr. Thomas. And when I pulled that data down because I had another tool where I could send bulk text messaging, reminders and things like that to the people who were sent the invitations. So that's how I initially sent out all the invitations using her, she gave me her contacts from her phone or something or whatever. But looking at how people completed the pop-up RSVP form, reservation, let's just say that's easier. I was like, oh goodness, because after we closed down the ability for them to register, I wanted to make sure I can send reminder emails. I do data cleaning, but sometimes you don't want to have to do all that. And if you're doing it as a hobbyist project, you may not have access to all the different libraries that can help you scrub that data, and you may not want to write all of that. You'll notice the number and party here. The number and party relates to, for this one person filling out the form, how many people are coming with you, including you. So in the first model, one page will be limited to only 2 people, 1 and 2, you and your data, or you and your child. In the second model, we expanded that to up to 5. Because I noticed that at this specific wedding, you had people that came more than 2. That keeps people from having to register multiple times just so you have an accurate head count. All right, so I put in the SQL here so you can see it. We're not going to go into it much in detail. It is included in the package so you can see how I came up with it. I really want you guys to be able to capture just the process of how I went from, this is my idea of what I want to do, to putting together all the individual components. I picked up a template. I decided what data entities I need. Within those entities, I decide what data attributes do I need, right? And then after I did that, I had to say, okay, how do I talk to SQL and tell SQL to do all these things in this data store for me? Most of you, I'm going to assume that you know about this. And again, like I said, you can go back and watch our video on YouTube under Women Who Code DFW, and it gives you some additional information on that. One thing I will point out here, you'll see in the first box here, up here on the top, couples, where on the primary contact, we limited to bride or groom. When you come down to RSVP, again, for the scope of this project, I mentioned that the person, we were going to limit it to just the wedding and reception, even though they might have multiples. If you decide you want to expand the project, this is where you expand it here in this code when you create the table, so it'll accept those values. Events, you'll notice again, event types is it's limited to just wedding and receptions. Now, for data specialists, we could have normalized this even further. We could have had a little table where we had types of events. You just build that table. Since this is about an hour presentation, I shortened it down. We can just focus in on the 3 entities, but we could normalize that even higher. Like I said, we could have the model for the user that would be probably the event planner, and we could link it in here somewhere, and then have all the different supporting tables to populate data versus doing it this way. All right, so we talked about being able to look at models and objects. For this, for the back end, what I decided to do in this, to give you just a little bit more depth to it, in the original one, I used a class to do my data connections, but I didn't necessarily use models in that first one that I wrote for my friend in order to manage all the different data as far as classes, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. So we're going to look at in here, I shouldn't have had a word RSVP on there, typo. But we're going to look at how do you create, read, and update and delete. In scope, let's see here if I can get this thing to come on. For the first one, couples, we have the ability to read and create, but not update or delete. All right, should have had this better set up just a little bit, so. If it'll populate. All right, so when I'm talking about a model, this is what I'm talking about here. Basically, you'll see at the top where I came in and I created pretty much a class where all those data elements we were talking about, they're sitting here. It also has the database connector. You'll see here we've got a one for create, where I was showing you on the slide that we'll be able to create, we'll be able to read one, but we won't be able to delete or update. Reason being is because we didn't create those panels, those UIs, for them to go and enter the couple of information. In order to test couples, I created just a simple script like this, where you see where I'm here, I call the class couple, and I put in Fred, Flintstone, Wilma, Lucky, and to create that record in the database using the store. This is the process that I would put back behind a panel if I was updating a form, and we'll look at that here in a little bit. All right. Just did that. Okay, same thing with events. We can create an event, read an event, but it's, and again, I'm talking about just the model that we just looked at the code, but we won't be able to update or delete an event. Let's see here. All right, so here again, here's the events model. You can kind of see the same structure. You got a class, and you've got some functions in there, a create function that's pulling another class in order to talk to the database. We've got the read function defined. You'll notice down here under update and delete, it simply says that updating an event isn't configured for this project. So I could build this out Again, once you get the code, you could build it out yourself. It's just simply putting a SQL query in there to do that. And again, again, we probably could have used a framework or something like that, where we wouldn't have had to code it this way. But I think I wanted you guys to kind of see how would you do this just using plain Jane PHP, plain Jane SQL. There are some tutorials out there on Laravel where you can use a Laravel, you create the model and all of that stuff. I may add that on the helpful links when I package this up for you. But you'll also see I added in some other goodies on the end of this. When we were talking about objects and classes, talking about what type of action you want to happen on the object. We want, for the events, we want to be able to create one. Once it's created, we want to be able to read it, but we're not going to be able to update it. We're not going to delete it. So actions on that data would have been deleting it or updating it or something like that. We also can read it. You'll see this get all function, again, when I decided to expand it, I created the ability where I could go out here and get all the different events that's within the data store. In order to test events, I did the same thing. I just created just a PHP script. Again, this is the Atom IDE. Let me see here. If I go over to couples, let's go back to couples. Let's see here. Bear with me, I'm a little tall, y'all, so leaning over sometimes isn't the best. The reason why I'm doing it this way, again, if I had created a form, we could just connect it, and I'll show you guys that here in a minute when we get to the reservations, because the RSVP has all functionality too. You see here in this specific model, instead of having a getter and setter for each single thing, I created one set value, and within this model it's just passing what the name of that data attribute is, and it's setting that value so that when we get down here to line 24 and it calls create and it runs that SQL, it's going to create the record with this specific data within it. So I added in Jane Doe at email.com. She's married, let me see, I probably should put Jamie. Let's do Jamie. Okay. She's marrying Susie Lucky. We're gonna say that the bride is the primary contact. We did a session a couple weeks ago on testing. Again, when you're working with frameworks, a lot of them have test suites built in them, so you can do it a little bit differently. This one, I'm just using pure PHP code. It's like trying to type, like talking and riding a bike, not really. Okay, so within Atom, I added the ability to be able to run code from the command line, so I'm gonna do that. Okay, so it just told me that down there at the bottom, it's just echoing out that ID3 was created, okay? So that record got added over here to my couples database. You guys see that? So all the code is going to be in there. It shows you how to create the scripts, shows you how to make the models talk to the database, and then makes the models talk to the UI. We're going to look at that here in a little bit. Let's put it back over. All right, so the RSVP model, you'll notice that ding, 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 ding. We're gonna do everything. As I mentioned before, with an invitation, when we go to that pop-up form, we're gonna manage individual reservation by the email and the event ID, right? Okay, so we will update that record. So when we look at that model, you'll have the ability to do that. All right, so let's see here. Oh, okay. All right, so if we go over here to my models folder and we click on the RSVP, you'll notice I'm still working on that one. I had a little snag in there, trying to get it converted. But again, you see kind of the same structure where it's pulling in a class, DB query, those data attributes that we talked about. You see all of those. Within the models, I try to use snake case so that as you walk through the project and you're trying to really get it to register for you, you can follow along from the slides to when you look at that entity relationship with the data attributes listed to looking at them in the individual models. So this is the one for RSVP. Again, just to keep it simple, I did the same thing when testing this. I just created a simple test script because I had some classes, some models built where that I could just test it to make sure it was working in PHP before I decided to connect it to my website later. I think in Laravel and some of the other ones, when they talk about test-driven development, a lot of times people start there first. But at least I could kind of see here with some of the errors that if I'm getting anything, if I had fat fingered a number or anything like that, I would have all of that popping out for me within this IDE. But you'll notice here with the RSVP, as we get ready to go into talking about how you connect the end-to-end, each one of those attributes we talked about where we just invite somebody, someone fills out that pop-up form, we set the values for each one of those attributes here within this model, okay? So I am going to this would run the same way as we did the other two if we wanted to add it, because I'm kind of slow typing it this way. I'm going to show you the other way with the UI. So let's see here. Okay, so the last part is we're going to look at how do we connect the layers, how do we get them to talk to each other. For this specific project, we are using, again, HTML. We have PHP embedded variables, right? Then we're using jQuery and Ajax to make the calls. And again, the backend layer, we just looked at the models. We just looked at some of the embedded SQL that's within those models. All right, so now we're on the section of seeing the website demo, and my foot wants to go to sleep. Let's see here. That's not good. Let's see here. All right. All right, so this is the website that you guys saw originally.
Like 15 minutes, then we'll do Q&A.
Okay. This is the website that you guys saw. So if we take a look here at the original template, you will notice here in the URL, I updated it to MVC You see Fred and Wilma there. If I put in 1, we get Al and Peggy. Makes sense? So used to scrolling. Okay, you'll also see where the data updates there. Again, I didn't spend any time updating the CSC. You'll see where when we pointed out those boxes for the addresses, that also updates, and then also the RSVP dates. It's all pulling from the data model. If we click here, you'll notice the event form pops up. Since we expanded our RSVP model, we added some additional fields, as I discussed. I didn't want just one field. I wanted to be able to get email and all that good stuff. So if we went in here and we said, Robert, fill out the form. Okay, let's see, who am I on? I am on couple 1 over here. Oh, we're gonna stop right there so I can show you. We're on couple 1 right now. There are a few hard codes in here where when I converted this from the original site that I had for my friend, where I left the available seats at 100, invitations sent out at 250, versus putting those attributes in the event model. We could have did that. That could be homework for you guys, where you expand the event model, where that you pull invitations and available seats variable from there, so that it'll update this dynamically. You'll see that we've got Bootstrap Enable in this one, where it updates the UI base for the names down there. You'll also notice how many responses we've got so far. Using those models, we updated this with a couple of buttons where every time for the event planner on her dashboard, she can see all of her couples, right? Okay. Let's see here. That's not what I wanted. Okay, this is my friend that got married. This is the one where I said it was a one-page template. We started, we had everything. Why is it not pulling? Oh, we're not on Wi-Fi. Okay. Okay, let's see if that Wi-Fi connects, and then I'll go back to that. Without the Wi-Fi, it won't pull the Bootstrap and all of that good stuff. Let's see. That site is probably still live. Nope, it still don't have me connected. Let's see here, let's go back here. Okay, so I'll have to show that here in a minute. Okay, so then you can see, you can search by events. If you click on the couples, you're gonna go to the couples page, which we're looking at over here on this tab. If you click on the events, then it's just gonna take you to the dashboard. It's gonna change out the dashboard item. So we're looking at couple 1. If we wanted to change to couple 2, we would do that, and you'll see the numbers change. Did you see that? Okay. Here. We came here and changed it there. It will pull it up there. I'm gonna click back here, go back over to Al and Peggy, and we're gonna click going, And we'll see how, when we go back to our user stories, it notifies them that we've got your registration. So again, at the beginning, we talked about the user stories, what's important to us in this project, some different things that we could add in on this. And they're gonna do a workshop, I believe the next one in PHP, how would you send an email? So that's something else you could take away and build into this. After you create the record within the data set for reservations, I want to send a nice little email, or you might decide to plug in Twilio and send a nice little text. Well, we can't do text messaging. You would have to add their mobile number and all that good stuff, which we didn't collect. But if we decided we wanted to collect the mobile number, we would just expand this here. Are you with me? Then we would go back to our data model. We would also go over to, let me just show you right quick. As you walk, once I post this code in GitHub, when you go to the setups folder, I put the full script in here for you, okay? You can reach out to me on Slack if you get stuck and you're trying to change it and play with it, just kind of get up to, work out some of your ideas on what you want to do. If you were in my PHP amend with that script, and once you're on your database, you could come over here to simply SQL and paste that script in here. There's several different ways to update your SQL. That's just a simple way. That way, if you don't want to, once you install it locally and play around with it, if you don't want to worry about configuring other things, this would be one of the easiest ways to get that done. All right, are there any questions? Put some more helpful resources on there for you guys. Yes?
Did you implement like the emailing feature where you send the verification email, or?
Verification email to?
So like when a person RSVPs and they enter their email and they say that they're going, do they get an email or?
No,
Okay.
no they don't. They're gonna do a workshop on that on the next seminar, but I tell you what, I may add that in here. I use PHP Mailer. That's works good with sending emails. I might plug that in this one since it's not using a framework or anything, where that it just will send that email over.
Okay.
A lot of times you could just use the mail function if you got send mail enabled, if you're familiar with that. But if anybody wants to do that and you get stuck, just let me know, or attend the next workshop and they're going to walk you through that process.